Hey everyone, TheGamingChief here. Today I'm going to be doing a video on creating your own DayZ server using the OmegaManager server management software. This video is broken up into 3 parts, timestamps are on screen right now. So let's get started with a quick introduction. For a very quick rundown on why we're using the OmegaManager server management software, it just simply allows us to create a DayZ server, allows for creation of multiple servers at once on the same machine, has built-in mod support and mod server support, so it's very easy to add mods to. If you're looking for more information on OmegaManager, I highly recommend you check out my overview/review of it. It covers a lot of the basic features and explains why I use OmegaManager over like bash scripts or something like that else instead. A link to that video is in the video description and is on the top right hand of your screen right now as well. Just as a quick note, this video is going to be creating a server from basically scratch here. If you already have a server using bash scripts and you want to convert it over to OmegaManager, I highly recommend you watch my video on this exact subject. A link to that video is in the video description and on the top right hand of your screen right now as well. For this video, I am going to be using a dedicated machine. This means I'm not hosting the server on my own desktop computer and I'm not hosting it on my home network. I always recommend you host servers on either a virtual private server or a VPS or a dedicated machine. VPSs and dedicated machines have full access to like the Windows installation, so versus like a game server, you just get like a little web panel and then you don't have any access to the actual operating system. You can rent VPSs and dedicated machines from companies like OVH and NFO along with other more local retailers. This one's more for North America, those two. Another option, which is what I personally do myself, is co-location. This is when you have a server or a desktop that you pay a fee to host inside of a data center. This means you get redundant power and internet with a data center grade internet connection. So it's basically very similar to getting a dedicated machine from renting from a company like OVH, but instead you own your own hardware and then it's cheaper. You just pay the data center a small fee in order for them to power on your machine and keep it connected to the network and cooling and all that stuff. If you want to host a DayZ server on your own computer or on another computer inside of your home network, you totally can, but I just typically don't recommend it if it's going to be a public server, as you can run into some unforeseen issues and security reasons and stuff like that. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get started. So as we can see, I am remoted into the machine I'm going to be using for this video. It is a fresh install of Windows Server 2019. There has been absolutely nothing done to it besides installing Chrome, and then if we go over here and take a look, we can see I added it to my domain. That way I can log in with my domain account and all that stuff. But other than that, it's basically a fresh install. If we look at control panel here, and we go to uninstall program, you can see we just have some drivers and stuff like that, so we should be good to go here. And before we download and install OmegaManager, we're going to go ahead and get one more thing set up real fast, and that's going to be a quick change to the Windows firewall. So I'm going to type firewall in here. It's going to bring that up. And then so your firewall should hopefully be turned on. But there is one setting we want to change. So once I have this open, I'm going to hit change notification settings. This does require admin rights, so I'm going to use my admin account here. And once that pops up, we're just going to go ahead and I like to enable this box, which is just notify me when Windows Defender Firewall blocks a new app. So this means if anything happens, say the DayZ server launches and it gets blocked because it wasn't allowed properly or something like that, we'll be able to know about it and then allow it just in case. This one, right now I am on domain network settings because I'm in a domain group. However, I'm just going to turn this on for all different profiles. So if I was on a public network, a private network, or whatever, it would still notify me. But I am currently on the domain network because it's tied to my domain. So we'll go and press OK on that. And we can close out of this. So now we can go and open up our web browser, and we're going to go ahead and navigate to the OmegaManager wiki page. This has the download and all that, and it will be linked in the video description. And this page has a bunch of general information about OmegaManager, how it works, setup, stuff like that. So if stuff ever changes or if you run into issues, just have a read through here. It has a bunch of stuff that should help you out. It's important to note that technically OmegaManager is only supported on Windows Server versions instead of Windows 10. However, I've seen it's pretty easy to set up. There's a little article here that just tells you the main difference you have to do. You just have to change a time/date thing. So we can actually do that right now on my personal computer. So we'll go ahead and minimize out of our remote connection for a moment here. And then we'll click on this. We'll go into our settings. And then once we're on our settings, we'll go into our time and date, and then we'll go into region. And then depending on what Windows version you have, so whether it's 2004, 20H2, or whatever, it depends on where this button is. So right here, additional date and time settings are up here. Sometimes it's down here as well, so you may have to look around. So we'll go ahead and open that up. And then we'll hit the number format one right here. Go to the admin side, change system locale. And then right here we have the option for the beta, which will use worldwide language support. We do have to have that enabled, so we'll press OK on this. And this is going to ask you to restart. You'll go ahead and restart your computer and you should be good to go. Again, you only have to do this if you are trying to run this on Windows 10. But realistically, if you're trying to run a server, it's probably best if you're running it on Windows Server. So we can go ahead and close out of all this and get reconnected. Now that we're back in here, we can go and just move that over there out of the way. And then we have the download for the CF Tools OmegaManager exe. So we're going to go ahead and download this. So it's going to go ahead and start the download, and it's already complete. So we'll right click, hit show in folder, and then we have the OmegaManager exe right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this, I'm going to cut it, and we're going to go ahead and find somewhere we want to keep all our server data at. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and go onto my C drive. And then on the very root of the drive, I'm going to create a new folder. And this is just going to be called servers. I'm going to put it in there. And then I'm going to create a folder named DayZ. And this is really up to you. You can name this whatever you want, put it where you want. This is just kind of my preferred method. And then once we have that there, we'll go ahead and click on it. And then we'll hit more info and then run anyways. And then it does require administrator privileges. So again, I'll use my admin account to go ahead and escalate that or elevate. And this will take just a moment. And now it's just going to go ahead and start downloading everything. It's currently setting up a Steam CMD folder, which is how it downloads the game along with mods and updates and all that stuff. So this will just take a moment while it downloads everything. And then now that Steam CMD is installed, it's going to go ahead and try to install DirectX. DirectX is required in order to run the DayZ server. So it goes ahead and gives us an installer. We'll go ahead and agree to the license agreement. And this will go ahead and help us set up DirectX real fast. And then let's, the download size. We'll hit next. And this is downloading everything it needs for DirectX. And it's now downloaded everything, so it's going to go ahead and quickly install that. So we'll just go ahead and wait on that. And DirectX is now installed. We'll hit finish on this, and then this will continue as soon as it realizes that's finished. And then now we have Visual C++, so we'll go ahead and have to agree to those terms as well. We'll go ahead and install that, and it's successful. We'll go ahead and close out of that. And then it's going to go ahead and create our manager.cfg file. So this is like a config file, and it's going to go ahead and open it up for us so we can go ahead and autofill some details in. And that's mainly going to be our username, API key, and password. So let me go ahead and grab those, and we'll be right back. Alrighty, so we have our username for a Steam account, and then we have a temporary password I generated for it and switched it to. So that will be good to go. This Steam account does own DayZ, so it's kind of important that you use a Steam account that owns DayZ because it's needed in order to do updates and mod downloads and workshop stuff. So make sure you use an account that does own the DayZ game. It's also recommended that you use an account that you don't use daily, so that way you don't get logged out of it whenever you try to open Steam on your computer or whatever. So it's just best to do that. Another thing to keep in mind is what type of authentication you have set up, or for two-factor. Steam tries to push using the Steam app, which I agree you should do on your personal accounts. However, for an account that's dedicated to doing this type of stuff, you'll want to probably just have it on email verification. So it just needs one email the first time you set it up and you'll be good. That's what this account's set up for, is it uses email verification instead of the Steam app. If you use the Steam app, then you would need it every single time it tries to log in, which is going to cause some issues. So we'll go ahead and leave mobile authenticator as false because we won't be using it. And then now we need to get our API key. So if we take a look over here back on the wiki page, it does have a link conveniently there for us. So we can go and click on that. And then we're going to sign into that account. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in here. And then because I haven't signed in on this computer before, I will need to do the one-time email verification. So let me go grab that code real fast. Alrighty. And we have our code, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. You can enter a friendly name here if you really want to. I'm not going to sign back in here, but I'm going to do it anyways. So I just entered what this is, so we'll hit submit on this. And we don't need to save that, and we'll hit proceed to Steam. So this is an old API key that I've used in the past. We're going to go ahead and revoke that and generate a new one. So the domain name, you can either enter a domain name that you own or your server IP address. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and use my domain. And then you do have to agree to the API terms of use. So we'll go ahead and check that. Again, you can enter your server IP here if you would like instead. So we'll hit register. And it gives us a new API key that we can use for now, which will get changed later. So we'll go ahead and copy that. Go back into the notepad that has our settings. And we can go ahead and paste that in right there. So now that we have the Steam login stuff all sorted out, there is a few more settings we can change if we really want to. So the port, this is going to be the web server port. There's no real reason to change this unless you already have something else running on 8081. And if you do, you can know how to change this and how that works. The next thing is for the updater. So this is basically some settings that come into play whenever the OmegaManager detects that there has been an update to either a mod or for the game client itself. So it'll go ahead and trigger an automatic restart for you. The first parameter is the grace period, so basically how long after it detects that there's been a change, it will wait until to shut down the server. And then there's a notification interval, which is actually new since the last time I have really talked about OmegaManager. In my overview, I kind of complained a little bit about there not being something like this. So basically, beforehand, it would be every single second, it would say the message about the server going down to restart. Now you can actually specify this to change it to be 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever makes sense for your grace period for shutdowns. And then this one is just an option to shut down on mod updates. So if there's a mod update as it is true, it will go ahead and start the grace period and do a restart so it can update. And then the game server is the same thing. If the game, it detects that it's been updated, the actual game itself, then it'll go and trigger a shutdown. And then the interval, which is 600 right now, so that's just how often it's going to check for mod and game server updates. You really shouldn't need to change this. I don't recommend changing it, or at least I wouldn't recommend making it any lower. You could make it potentially a little higher, but 600 is perfectly fine. And then it has the text, and again, you can change this, but this just says CF Tools OmegaManager, shutdown requested. So this is just if you're in your web panel, you click shutdown, it's just going to be like, okay, I'm going to tell them that a shutdown's happening, and then it's just going to happen. Next is the mod update notice. So this is the message you'd get if the server was going down to update a mod. So it will tell them how much time's left and the mod that's being updated. Same thing with a general update notice if the game has been updated. And then there's an option for experimental as well. And for deployment, we have firewall rules equals true. We want to leave that way. So now that we've made the changes we want to make, we'll hit File, Save, and we'll close out of this. And if we look over to OmegaManager, it says that the manager.cfg was missing, which of course it was because we just downloaded the software, and has been created. Please make appropriate changes, which we have. We'll press OK, and it closes out fully. And now we can go ahead and restart it again. And again, we'll go ahead and need to elevate this process. And it's going to go ahead and get everything started. And then right here, as you can see, it tried to log me in. And since we haven't logged into Steam CMD, we'll also need to do the one-time code for this. Only one time though, as it wasn't the same as when we did it in the browser. So let me go grab that out of my email real fast. Alrighty, so I have the code copied. So I'm just going to go ahead and right click, edit, and then paste that code in. And it will verify that. And then this is going to immediately give you a security alert. And it's going to say, hey, this is trying to, go through the firewall, which we want it to. So we'll hit allow access. And now it's going to go ahead and download a copy of the game for us to use. So this will take just a moment. And it went ahead and downloaded it. So it's creating that deployment folder. So it can go ahead and use that. We can kind of move this to the side and watch what it's doing. And actually right there it says it's ready already. So that's perfect. but we can see we don't have any servers created yet, but it creates a deploy folder that uses this whenever we create a new server. So now that it says that it's ready, it's running on localhost 8081. So we can open up our web browser, we'll open a new tab, and we can close out of that. And we'll go to localhost 8081. So localhost meaning this machine on port 8081. And it's going to go ahead and load up OmegaManager. And there's not a whole lot of options starting off here, so you can start all, stop all, force an upstream check, which we don't really want to do that if we don't have anything here yet. So the first thing we're going to be doing is deploying a new instance. So this will be creating a new server. This is the instance ID, so it's going to be how it identifies itself along with the directory name. Technically, you can put anything in here. You can put test, you can write out whatever. I like to leave it with just numbers, so I'll leave this as for server 0. Next is going to be your game port. 2302 is the default game port for DayZ. And then next is going to be the Steam query port. This 27016 is also the default one, so we'll just leave that. And then it automatically generates you an Archon password. You can change this right now if you'd like, but I'm going to go ahead and go with this default and change it later. So we'll go ahead and click on deploy, confirm new instance, and it's going to go ahead and start that in the background. And if we open up the command window here, we can kind of see everything it's doing. And we can see it already deployed. It was very fast. So if we see here, we have our main server already created, but I'm going to go back to the dashboard here for a second. So we're on the home page and we have 3 buttons here. Start will obviously start it. Overview will open up the overview menu, and then open directory opens the actual directory of it. We can go ahead and close out of that. And you have a few more things about if it's up to date, auto start, if you have the CF Tools API enabled. I'll probably have a different video about that later on. It's a bit more in depth, but we're going to go ahead and do the overview. And there's nothing really here because we haven't started the server for the first time yet. It gives us some actions like start, create a persistence backup, do a full backup, verify the file. So that's the same as like verifying the actual game files to make sure it's not corrupt. We can restart the internal mod server, we can make a copy of the server, and we can delete it. We'll go over to server configuration, and we're going to go ahead and quickly make some setting changes. So I'm just going to go ahead and set a host name. So that's what I set my host name. That's what will appear in the DayZ standalone launcher. We can go ahead and set the slot limit. I'm just going to put this at 5. And then we have a game server password. I'm just going to set that to 123. And then in-game password, which I'm just going to smash my keyboard a little bit for. And then you're going to have a bunch of different settings. So, server time, so what the time will be on startup. The mission, so we're going to be using Chernarus Plus, so we're not going to be using any other third-party maps for this. I might have a different video on that, but it's relatively simple. You just have to go ahead and change the name. So say if we wanted to go ahead and, let me pull it up real fast. If we go into our server, so we're in servers, server 0 is the one we just created, MP missions. So there's the other DayZ official map. If we wanted to, we could rename this or just copy the folder name and do this, and it'll load the other map. However, we're going to stick with Chernarus. And then you have some time acceleration, night acceleration. This is all fairly self-explanatory, your time persistence. Just kind of read through it and it explains to you what it all does. Same thing here, disable personal light. You can enable a whitelist if you want to do that. And then guaranteed updates, you'll leave that. Log FPS, I usually change this because it kind of goes in the log every 10 seconds, which is kind of annoying for me. So I prefer to do every 5 minutes, so I throw 300 in there. And then there's some other things, including verify signatures. Don't change that from 2, leave that on 2. And then you have the font quality, which 20 is usually fine. I think the max is 30 if you really wanted to bump it up, but you probably want to leave that on 20. And then right here allows you to go ahead and do custom variables. So one of the settings that isn't included here that I know of is log players. And then we can say, every 5 minutes, we can add the variable and it gets added. So if there's any other variables you want to add to your config file that doesn't come default, that's how you add them. And we'll go ahead and save our changes on here. And then we'll quickly jump over to the next tab. And then this just has some stuff relating to the instance. If you want it to auto start, I don't want it to rotate logs. That's probably a good idea. Backups are good as well. This is all pretty normal. Your game port, if you decide to change this later. Profiles, you can leave that. This is more advanced stuff for the most part if you want to add some additional launch parameters. And you can also change some other things in the process, whether or not to elevate it, process detection, affinity mask, all that stuff. You really don't need to change most of this, so I would just not touch it if you don't know what you're doing there. And then if you have a CF Tools subscription, you can do your service ID and your API key here. Again, we weren't going to be covering that for now, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that. And since we did make changes on this, we'll go ahead and make a save there. And then there's the mod configuration, and you can go ahead and add your mods and stuff like that. I might have a more in-depth video on it, but if we look over here, this kind of explains how it all works. So I'm going to go ahead and add CF real fast. Yeah, so we'll just add CF for now. Whenever you add a mod, you want to go to the workshop page and actually figure out the install instructions. So whenever you enable this, all it's going to do is it's going to download it, put it in your game directory, and launch it. Depending on what type of mod it is, there's usually more stuff you'll have to do, such as editing config files, editing your types files, and all that. But I know for a fact CF is just you download it and you launch it with your game. So we'll go ahead and save that. And there's also in the advanced tab server event history. This just kind of tells you started, stop, stuff like that. So now that we have that all going, I'm going to go ahead and go to the dashboard real fast. And I'm going to go ahead and hit install untracked mods now. Since we don't have CF already installed, we're going to go ahead and click on that because it's going to go ahead and do everything that hasn't been installed yet. And then now that that is tracked and installed, we'll go ahead and hit start. So when you click start server, that's when it actually makes your changes to the config file. So you just saw the name changed right there. And nothing really changes until you start the server, and then those settings get applied. So as we can see here, we get a Windows security alert, and it's the DayZ process that wants access, which we want to give it access so we can connect to it. And this is all just the local firewall. If you have an external firewall, you'll have to allow it through there as well, and we'll get to that in a minute. And we can open this up and kind of see what it's doing in the background, and we can also see what's going on in our server. And it looks like our server is nice and launched. So if we go ahead and minimize out of here, and we open up the DayZ standalone launcher, and it's going to go ahead and download the latest server list. If you don't have the DayZ standalone launcher, you can just go to their website. So if we go here, so we'll just search DayZ SAL, it'll come up. And once you're on the main DayZ standalone launcher page, you'll just click download and you'll go ahead and get that downloaded. DayZ standalone launcher is really kind of what everyone uses, and that's the best way to join modded servers, so that's why this automatically adds it to it. So we'll go ahead and minimize out here, and we'll full screen that. And if we filter by TGC, if we look here, we'll see the server is actually not here. And the reason why for that is going to be a firewall issue. So let's go ahead and look back at our server. And if we look in here, we should see it. So I'm going to scroll up just a little bit. So right here you get the DayZ standalone query process. So it's for my IP address here for the server, and it's giving an error, timeout has occurred. And the reason why we're getting that error is because this machine is behind a firewall. And it just kind of depends on the machine whether or not you'll be behind a firewall or not. If you get a virtual private server or a dedicated machine from a provider like OVH or something like that, you may or may not be behind their own firewall as well. So typically you'll have the operating system one, which is the Windows Defender one, which we were allowing earlier here. But then you have the one that is on like a router configuration level. And that's our issue here. So if we even go into check server here, we quickly pull up if I could type correctly, if we pull up the IP address of this machine that I have configured, if I copy that, put it in here. You don't normally have to do this. OmegaManager does it for you, but I'm just doing this for troubleshooting purposes to show. And we put the query port in, we hit check, and wait for that. Again, it'll give you that timeout as error, and that's because we will have to go ahead and allow this through the firewall. And you most definitely will have this issue if you are doing this on your own home network. Pretty much any home network in existence, you'll have to log into your router and get that going. And it all kind of depends on your provider and stuff like that. So if I open a command prompt here, I do ipconfig, it's going to go ahead and pull this up, and it's going to tell me that my gateway is 10.0.0.1. So that's where my firewall/router is. So I'm going to go ahead and get connected there. And then you'll probably get a security error. We'll hit advanced and continue. So this gets me to my pfSense firewall, so I can /router, so I can go and get logged in and do that port forwarding. And then whatever that default gateway that's listed in the command prompt, that's going to be your gateway /router /whatever, depending on how it's set up. And then once you're on the login screen, you'll need to know the login credentials. Typically, it'll say something at the top of like what it is, so like Linksys, whatever, model, whatever. And you can just do that as a Google search plus default username and password to get the login. And then you'll be able to do that. It just kind of depends. Typically, you want to just look up what your router is and how to port forward, and you'll kind of find some details out about that. Because I guarantee you it's not going to look anything like this right here, and it all varies on your router. So I'm just going to go ahead and get logged in here. And now that I'm logged in, we're going to go to my firewall settings, and we'll go ahead and go into my NAT settings. And then so this just has my port forwarding rules, and we're going to go ahead and create a new one. And then so yeah, this is going to be my WAN interface, TCP over and UDP. And in this case, if they go to the IP address that I have dedicated to the game server on the port that we specify, so we're going to be specifying the game port, so it's going to be 2302 is the default one. If you changed it, you'll have to change it here as well. And then it's going to be the redirect target IP, so this will be the internal IP of your machine. As we saw earlier when we did the IP config, we can see right here my IPv4 address is 10.0.0.11. And again, the port's going to be 2302, so I'll go ahead and get that in there. And you can add a description, so in this case I'm going to say allow 2302 on game server. And then I'm going to use all the default settings. Again, your settings probably won't look anything like this at all. If you search your router name plus port forward, it should give you some details on how to do it. So we'll go ahead and hit save on that. And then we can apply the changes as well. And then we're also going to have to add a second one as well. So we'll click on this. And again, we'll do TCP UDP. And then it's going to be on our interface for our game server. And then this is going to be our Steam query port. So it's 27016. And we'll go ahead and do that there. And then again, we're going to redirect it to this local machine that's hosting the server. Oh, not 1.11. And we'll put our redirect port. It's going to be the same as that. And then same thing here, except I'm just going to change the port number. And then we'll hit save. And we'll apply our changes. And we should be good to go here, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of that. And if we minimize out of here, and we can close out of that as well. Again, it just gave a timeout, so we'll go ahead and trigger a shutdown of OmegaManager real fast. Then I'll go ahead and exit, and then we'll go ahead and relaunch it now that we've made those firewall changes. And then while we're waiting on that to load, I just wanted to explain one quick thing. So this machine has a local IP address of 10.0.0.11, and it does have a public-facing IP address. If we go here, if I could still type correctly, and it's a 104.192.170.125, and that's our public-facing IP address. And if you are looking for a more in-depth explanation of how private versus public IP addresses work along with port forwarding, there is a video I do recommend. It's linked in the video description on the top right-hand side of the screen right now. It just kind of helps better explains the concept of why there's a private one, why there's a public one. But basically, a private one, it's only going to be within the scope of your router. You're not going to be able to access, out to the internet. No one's going to be able to type your private IP address in and connect to it. But it's a great video that kind of explains it and is very helpful for anyone who's looking to get into hosting servers and stuff like that, so you can kind of better understand how that works. And as we saw a moment ago, it said it was ready, so if we refresh this page here, looks like we're good. We're going to go ahead and give this a start and see if it's working now that we made those changes. Alrighty, and it looks like our server has fully launched, so we can go ahead and minimize out of our remote connection here. And then we can go ahead and restart the DayZ standalone launcher on our own computer. And this is just so it can re-download the server list. So we'll go ahead and restart that right there. It's downloading the new server list. We'll go ahead and full screen that. And then we'll search for our server here. And we can see it right here. So that's our IP address, 2302. And then CF is the only mod running on it right now, which is what we expect as we aren't running anything other than that. And let's go ahead and try to join our server and make sure everything appears to be working. So we'll go ahead and we have our 123 password there. We'll press OK, and this should go ahead and open up DayZ and get us into our server. Alrighty, and it looks like we are into our server. So we're able to open our inventory and everything. So yeah, we should be basically good to go on that. So I'll go ahead and just run over here real fast. And I just want to verify the doors are working and all that, pick up the coat, put that on, or in my hands I guess. Swap that out, do that, sure. Yeah, so it looks like everything appears to be working just fine. We'll drop that on the ground after we gather all this. And I have seen sometimes servers have weird issues where they can't pick stuff up. So sometimes you have to just wipe the database and try again. I've only seen that a few times, but I always like to double check that's working first, which it appears to be. So we'll go ahead and get out of here. We'll hit exit, and we'll go ahead and just skip this countdown and go ahead and exit, close out of our game, and go back into our remote server. Alrighty, so I just wanted to cover some quick common issues that I typically see in some of my previous videos and stuff like that, and people commenting and messaging me about. The first one is almost always the fact that their server does not appear on the DayZ standalone launcher after this, and that usually means there's something wrong. A good way to test it is to try to manually add it by going to their website. So we'll go to their website, we'll hit check server, and this is where you would enter your server IP address and then your query port, not your game port, which should be 2302. This is the Steam one, so 27016. So we have that, and if I hit check server on this, it's gonna work. It's gonna go ahead and show my IP address, port, the game, the server name, the map, players, and all the basic data. So let's go ahead and just change this to be, just add a 1 there instead of a 6. So what you can do to troubleshoot is you would put your public IP address. So you do my IP again, and to Google, get your public facing IP address, go ahead and plug that in right there, and then your port. And then if you hit check server and it says something went wrong, timeout has occurred. This is almost always because 1, your server's offline, or 2, you did not properly port forward your server if you are behind a firewall. I have also seen some certain ISPs, so your internet service providers, that block port forwarding. So you could make the port forward in your router and all that, but you'd be like double natted or something along those lines, so it wouldn't actually work and this wouldn't connect. And that's kind of another reason why I don't recommend running servers on your home connection. If that does appear to be the case, you'll just need to contact your ISP and see if they can work something out with you. But typically they'll say the same thing about it's a home internet connection, it's not supposed to be used for port forwarding. It just totally depends. And then another issue that I see that's fairly common is people saying, hey, I was able to add it to the DayZ standalone launcher, but whenever I look at it, it says it's offline. So that's either one of two things. It's either 1, your server is offline or off, or 2, which is usually more common, is that you're hosting your server on your home network connection. And if you're hosting on your own home network, it's typical to see your server is offline like this even when it's running. As long as people outside of your home network have a ping listed here and they're able to connect, you should be fine. And you should just be able to hit play on this, hit play again, and it should load you in even if it says you're offline. But this only applies if you're on the home network. You may also see the server only on the LAN tab if you're using the built-in server browser, which again is to be expected if you are hosting the server on your home network. As long as everyone else can see it on the community tab, it's perfectly fine. And then as far as trying to join your server, if you're on the home network and it says offline, if you click play here and it still doesn't let you play, it gives you like connection timed out or whatever, sometimes that can happen, and what you'll have to do is you'll have to go into your settings here for the DayZ standalone launcher, and then you'll have to add some additional parameters. So what you need to do is do -IP equals, and then you just have to specify whatever the IP address of your local machine is. So if I open command prompt here, I can find my local one. If I scroll up through here, so mine's 172.17, so let me move that over there. Again, you'd only need to do this if you were hosting this on your own computer or your own local network or your home network or whatever. This isn't something you typically have to do if you're hosting it off-site and with a dedicated machine. So we'll continue to type the local IP address that I have here. So it's .33.24. So this would work if the server was being hosted on this exact machine, because this is for my local machine. Say if it's another machine in your house that has a .30 or something like that, you do that. You just enter the local IP address of whatever machine's hosting the actual DayZ server. And once again, just one final reminder, this only applies if you have the offline and it's because you're hosting on your home network. So we'll close out of that. And the final common issue I see and get comments about is people who make typos or other issues with reading the error messages. If you ever get an error message, just take a moment to go ahead and read and try to understand what the error message means. While error messages are very annoying and DayZ error messages definitely aren't super helpful, they give you an idea of what's going on. So try to read it, understand what it means, and then you can just give the error a quick Google search. You might be able to figure out why you're getting that error. And if you're still having issues, of course, feel free to leave me a comment. Myself or someone else will try to reply to it. You can also join my Discord server, which is linked in the video description as always. My Discord server does have a channel dedicated to getting help with DayZ related issues, so I recommend checking that out as well. And that's really about it. So we have our server right here. We did just a basic bare setup today. We didn't go super far into mod configuration and stuff like that, as this is just a standalone quick setup. And if you wanted a second server, you hit deploy new instance and you just create a second server. It's that easy. And that's kind of why I like using OmegaManager. It makes adding mods, like say CF was super easy to add, along with just having multiple servers on the same machine. Again, just make sure if you are behind any firewall that you do forward the listed IPs that you use. So if I deploy a new instance, I'm going to have new ports, and make sure you get those forwarded in your router/firewall if you have one. And if you're not behind a firewall, like if you're renting a VPS from a big provider, then you don't have to worry about that. Your ports are already going to be open. And that's really about it. It's very likely I forgot something or made a mistake at some point in the video, so always be sure to check the video description and the pinned comment for any corrections. I will always try to list them there. If you have any video suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below as well. And I always hate to do this, but I want to put this up real fast. Over 80% of my viewers are not subscribed. Just saying, if you find these DayZ videos helpful, just consideration, Anyways, other than that, you guys have a good one.